Hi everyone, some people asked me about what passes do I use in Photoshop and in Vray and how do I composite them in Photoshop. So I thought I would do just a short video to show you basically a list of all the passes that I use, how I use them, why I use them, and to what objective or in what goal. And hopefully this will be useful. So yeah, let's dive in. So from there, generally what I'll do is I'll run my little, where is it? Refraction Filter, yeah, okay. I'll run my little action. Oops, I just need to rename this. That sort of gives a rough structure of how I'm going to use all my passes and the type of things I need to do with them. And from there I can sort of show you more easily how I use them. So it's going to be a little bit more straightforward. So I can remove the black and white thing. So basically here are all the passes that I export. There's generally the alpha, the diffuse filter, total lighting or lighting, specular, render ID or multimatte or cryptomatte or whatever. There's the glare one that I usually export. There's a denoised, light select, extra text or dirt map for the ambient occlusion, several Z depth pass, the normal pass, reflection, refraction filter, sometimes a reflection filter, and the last one will be the shadow basically. So if I take them just quickly, the alpha is like a very basic one that everyone knows. What I use, the way I use it generally is to put it on my, directly on my stack of layers. That way under I can start putting background, etc. One thing generally that you have to know is that you can sort of change, like when you're going to select and mask, you have a shift edge here that can be useful, especially for foliage, because usually the mask is not 100% accurate because of the anti-aliasing and stuff like that. So generally I will have the alpha for that. If I go down, have the multimatte element, which is basically just for selection purposes. So very simple. Object ID does the same thing, but the multimatte is a bit more cleaner. One thing, so you can see here the object ID, and another one that can be nice as well is the render ID. This one I use it really, it's very useful for, just not having to create IDs separately for everything. So that way you are sure that you have a selection mask for everything, even if it's going to be a bit rough, it might need a bit of refining. It's still very, very useful. The ambient occlusion mask is very interesting. Here it's fun because it's the basic built-in AO pass in Vray. Usually what I would do is do an extra text that would from here, and I would have a dirt map in it. The one thing that is interesting is that it gives you a little bit more control. The way I would use the ambient occlusion is generally in my light thing. You can see it's been copied here. What I do is I set it to multiply with a very low opacity, like 25, but generally I'll push it down to 15. What it does is that it helps you refining your edges. If I keep it like that, you can see you have edges that appear again. The good thing with this one is that basically it gives you a lot of way to refine how you want to use it. So what I do generally is I have a base that is very low opacity, and then what I can do is duplicate it and locally keep it. So for instance, if I wanted one of the very simple scenario where I will use it is if, for instance, I have joints in a facade, and I can use my AO pass locally around these joints, and then to multiply it even 10 times, just group it. So I would just do this and then group, and I would have my joints here, and then I would just hide it and reveal it just around the joints. That way Sometimes, you know, you have like a cladding system or something like that, that you want your joints to be more visible than they are because the lighting is actually not showing them that much. So with that sort of very simple trick, you can actually still retain that sort of detail in your image, which is very, very convenient. Atmosphere, I'm not using it here because there's no atmosphere, but it can be useful for like if you already have some sort of aerial perspective or stuff like that. Denoiser is a, well, very basic one. One thing I would recommend is to never use it at full opacity. So I would generally put it on top and have it like at a, I don't know, maybe 50 or generally not above 70%, because I don't like the way it looks when everything is super flat looking and clean looking in a way. Light select is very interesting because what it does is that it helps you selecting lights per layers or per lights individually or not individually. And the way you use it, or at least the way I use it, is that you can, there's different ways. You can either just literally copy the thing on top. Well, you have to place it properly, but like you could use just the screen mode. So as you can see, I'm like already pumping up the lighting in there. Another way you can use it is by copying the content of your light select and go into like a curve thing, and then you can just copy paste it in place here. And here it means you have something where you can also control a bit more the lighting basically. One thing also that you can do is to use some color balance. That way you can sort of shift the temperature of your I just need to check, yeah, you can change the color or the temperature, sorry, of your lighting quite easily. So making it like colder, making it warmer, everything is possible. One thing you need to be careful with, I'm doing it on top of my stack here. Normally I would put it in the Refraction Pass that is here. So all this sort of adjustment, this one, sorry, would come on top of here. That way I still have my reflection on top. So regarding this reflection and refraction pass, I have several of them. One thing that I do generally is that I have, so reflection and refraction. One thing that is important is that as I was explaining in the beginning, is that I denoise my refraction pass and I will merge it, or like use it just like for any denoised pass with a certain amount of opacity, so that I have like a noisy and less noisy way of doing it, or like look. And that way I can have this sort of final result if I have my denoised pass that is here. So yeah. And the way I will use it is, well, pretty simple, is that I just put it in my, I use like the refraction filter to select my glass. So this is the refraction filter here. That is very simple to extract. And that way I can use it as a mask here, and I directly know that everything that is going to be in this folder is going to be stuff happening behind the glass in my building here. So then I just have like a lot of stack of stuff here, but this is basically refraction and reflection pass. The refraction, I usually set it to screen on top. I have like a normal 100%, and then on screen on top, because it sort of makes it a little bit more bright and interesting. And then it's more like stuff regarding the lighting itself. Reflection is going to be the same, so I use the same refraction pass because it's the same glass. And what I'll do is that I'll have like a normal one at really low opacity just to get a little bit of texture. And then it's going to be either screen or overlay. Screen being something that is going to look more, let's say, brighter. And overlay is going to be more like revealing the shadows. One thing that is important is that generally you might need to sort of like push the levels of your passes a bit, because they render super dark for some reason. If I continue walking down there, there's the normal pass. This one I use it mainly as a selection pass when I want to select like a whole facade, or like beams or whatever that are facing the same direction, so that I can burn and dodge or change the levels and know that the lighting is going to be consistent. The thing though, there's also like some stuff you can do in terms of lighting that is quite fun. If you sort of like start playing with the, well, not locally like this, but changing the hue like this can help you actually making your light moving, but it's another whole trick that I won't go into detail for now. Reflection Pass, as I said, is fine. Filter, render ID. Shadows is a fun one. It's something that is generally a bit used weirdly because it's showing the thing in a sort of like negative way. So the way you use it generally is to just put it into subtract mode. And that way what it does is that it, as you can see, pushes your, what's the word? Shadows, sorry, very, like they become very strong suddenly, but it's then just a matter of playing with your opacity, and then you can see that you have like, you're playing with the shadows. One thing that is very interesting as well when you're using it is that it gives you, like potentially it will give you like shadows on the floor or something like that, and it helps in recreating it, especially for instance when you have like a surface and you're adding grass on top of it. By having this sort of shadow pass, you can recreate actual proper shadows and not just having to paint them again. So just don't make the error of like reverting it and changing like stuff in many ways to start using it. You just have to use the subtract mode and everything is already usable. And then it's just like opacity, and of course you can like mask it and use it more locally, because it's very rare that you use a pass in a homogeneous way over your whole image. So that will be it for the shadow pass. The Specular Pass is very interesting as well. I'll use it for different purposes. The main one I would use it, well, basically specular is like the reflection of direct light, if I understand correctly. The way I would use it is just to put it in my light pass or light stack and set it to screen generally. What it does, as you can see, is that it recreates very interesting reflection, but they are very strong. So generally you would like lower the opacity and whatnot, and like very, as I was saying, is like putting a mask on top and sort of erasing it when you don't need it, and pushing it a bit stronger where you need it. Two areas where I really use it all the time is for reflective surface, like this reflective surface on the floor, or any reflective surface that is very interesting. Metallic surfaces especially is going to look very cool. And one thing that I've started using it and that I found is very interesting is for all the foliage, in order to sort of have some interesting light, or highlight rather, happening in your foliage. So it helps in bringing a bit more depth if your vegetation is looking a bit like a bit dead. So you can see here already we're having like very nice highlights. If I push it like way too high, you can see here how it's working. So very, very nice in order to get a more interesting foliage. Still regarding foliage, another thing that you can do that is interesting is to use the total lighting. So total lighting is gonna, well, as its name implies, is that you have the overall lighting of all your scene. So what it helps also is in recreating some sort of interesting color back into your vegetation, because sometimes vegetation is going to render very dark and dull instead of being quite bright and like nice looking. So if you use your total lighting pass, you can sort of put it, if I, for instance, use my render ID and just select this guy here. Is that done correctly? Yeah. And I could use the total lighting. I'll just put it here for now. And what I would do is hide it. So here you can see I have my mask for this guy. I have my tolerance that is a bit too high, so that's why the selection is a bit weird. Yeah, this is better. So let's do this. And what I would do is, so here I have something on top, you can see already it's a bit different, is you usually set it to, honestly it depends. Usually color dodge is going to do something quite interesting. As you can see, it suddenly becomes way more lively. You just have to make sure that it's not a bit too much, because sometimes it will push the saturation a little bit too much up. So you can always play with opacity, but it still recreate more interesting lighting contrast in your foliage. If I do it on this one as well, I can just select this. Again, the tolerance is too. Oh yeah, no, there's like a fuck up in the render ID pass, for instance, for some reason. But if I do it here, you can see the difference already. That is quite interesting. And just like any pass that you use with a certain blending mode, you can just duplicate it and have like until you have the effect that you want. So for instance, if this I consider it's not enough, I can duplicate it and maybe lower the opacity, and then I go from this to this. Or if I go all the way with the specular one and I just push it, like this, and you can see already the difference between this foliage here and this foliage here. That is like way more interesting and eye-catchy than what we had earlier. So same for here. This one like for sure a little bit too intense, but the good thing is that once you have all the once it's properly organized in your stack, you can easily like remove it, keep it in some sort of highlighted way that you want, and erase it in some other areas that you don't want it. So this is very, very simple to use. Another type of pass that is very interesting, and that for some reason, the Z depth pass. So they're very basic ones, but they're very interesting. There are many ways to use them. One thing that I'll do all the time is to export like a far one and a near one. Near is going to be like here, it's a bit useless, but if you start having a bit of a foreground, it's interesting to create depth of field effect. And the far one is more like interesting if you want to start creating fog or aerial perspective in post-production. One way I would do it is there are different ways. Either way, you will need to invert it, and you can either set this to screen actually and then just play with the opacity, or one thing that is a little bit more interesting is to create a layer and you just pick the color of your aerial perspective, in the sense that this is going to be the far distance color, and you just copy the content of this one and you just add it as a mask here. And what it will do here, for instance, it's very ugly, but you have to play then with your opacity. And what it will do basically is to sort of have this interesting here. Maybe one thing that also is not quite nice with the Z depth pass is that you can go into your layer, use your levels, and you can change the way it's progressing. For instance, I can add a little bit, you might have some bending effect, so you have to be careful, but you can change the sort of overall progression. So that way here, my fog is going to start earlier, as you can see now. And here this is held like very subtle, but still very helping. And of course you can like completely change the opacity at any time, which is very, very convenient. One thing that I didn't mention that I think is very important is the diffuse filter. This one has, basically the diffuse filter is just like the actual map without any light applied to it or any glossiness or whatever. So just your albedo, if I may say. One thing that the way I use it most of the time is by using it in a curve map. So this is like the way I use in order to sort of emphasize more interestingly the contrast in an image for a specific material. So for instance, if I were to play around with so I'm just gonna remove these weird looking thing. If I were to play with, say, the stone here, what I would do is select my stone here, and I would go here and copy the content of this, and then I would create a curve adjustment layer, go into the actual curve and copy paste in place. And you'll see that actually what I'll do is, I'll just do both so that you can see the difference. Here I have this one. So here's the diffuse filter, and here's the normal one. So here, if I were to sort of change it and sort of recreate something a bit more interesting, maybe like that. Here, if I do kind of almost the same, you will see that the result is slightly different. If I hide this here, for instance, sorry. So, and I need to reverse it here. So this is very subtle, but you can see that it is slightly different. The reason it is slightly different is because it's actually not linear and not adjusting exactly the same way. Here it's maybe not the best example. Maybe it would have been better on this thing. Or maybe I could also use it. I could do, one thing that I've done is that I have like an action that does it now. So what I do is I just select whatever I need. So for instance, this thing, I have my individual material adjustment. And what it does essentially is that it goes and take this thing and create the pass I need directly. And here, basically, the sort of, what's the word? Consequence is that you need to sort of adjust it more and push it a little bit more in order to start to have like more clear effect. But what it does is that it has a more subtle way of changing it that is not linear across or homogeneous across the whole material, which is very nice. The materials for which it will work the best is when you start having like small details and intricate contrast. So for like woods, bricks, stones like this, asphalt works very well as well. So this is quite interesting to play around with. Coming back to this sort of total lighting thing, I can, for instance, use, where is it? My selection mask. Use this in order to bring back some details in there, like this and like this. And that way you can sort of see, but I could push it back, push it up a little. And sometimes I was saying is that you can use it with different types of, like here, you can see, for instance, with the linear dodge, that it helps in finding back details in my otherwise very dark element here. So this is very, very helpful. So either linear dodge add or color dodge, depending on how you want to use it. You just have to be careful that your saturation don't go like through the roof, because this is something that then will catch your eye quite a lot. I think that's pretty much it. There's not that many. This is like very basic elements. Don't look at the image in the sense of like this is looking like shit, but this is not the whole point of this video. It's more to show you like the stack of layers that you can use in order to be able to basically do everything. This is the good thing, is that once you have this stack of layer, there's literally nothing you can't do in post. Everything will be potentially tweakable. You will always be able to select what you need to recreate the reflection, choose the albedo, recreate all your reflection in Refraction Pass, change the colors, recover information that might be quite dark in your image and bring them back so that they become readable again or legible again, etc. So that's it. So just to show you a little difference quickly between the original and the back, just to show again the principle. So basically you can see the difference between the main one is like regarding the shadow and the reflection in the foreground. Here you can see like quite a bit of a difference between the base pass and the thing, with like just a little quick post-production of what I've been talking about, and like using the specular map, the shadow pass, and some diffuse filter adjustment and the curve adjustment. So you can see how it really brings more interesting life in your foreground and reflection. Same happened with the glazing here. There's like a little bit of specular plus the reflection map playing around with the screen and overlay blending mode. Also, the big difference is going to be with the vegetation. You can see here that is way more lively and contrasty compared with what we had here. Of course, I would still spend like way more longer refining this. Like it literally took me 5 minutes to do that, all these small adjustments. So, but you can already tell the difference between vegetation that looks very boring and dead and something that is like way more lively and fluffy and cute. So that's nice. Another thing that is also quite different, well, there's like the backdrop, but this is very basic. The shadow does have like more interesting contrast. I did change also a little bit the light inside to make it like fit a little bit more. But so you can see overall how these passes are really helpful. Oh, I drew on the image, but you can see how their passes are really helping in sort of like creating way more interesting images and giving you way more control over how you want it to look as a final result. So yeah, as you can see, the way I use these passes is quite straightforward, and it gives a lot of flexibility in order to almost never need to re-render if like a material is looking a bit odd, or if you need to change the lighting a little bit, or if you need to tweak anything. Also, I tried to show in a simple before after that even before actually adding stuff on your image, just playing around with the passes can really take your image to the next level and give you like a much better base before even like adding cutouts and like other shit like that. So yeah, I hope this was helpful. Let me know in the comment if I maybe forgot like an important pass that you use on a daily basis in your post-production for stills, and because I'm always looking forward to learning new stuff and implement them in my own workflow. So yeah, let me know, and I hope this has been useful, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.